Good evening, everybody. And I think the participants are all coming in. I want to welcome all of you to this wonderful Thursday series that we have. And I'm so very pleased that one of the leaders I have admired for a long time, whom I wish I had got to know even much better, Rakesh is today with us. Rakesh is one of the most respected leaders. I first met him when he was managing director of Tata Honeywell. And then I met him again when he was leading this, in his three avatars, Tata Honeywell, SKF in India, SKF globally. I also had a delightful lunch with him and his wife, and I and my wife were in Shanghai. And we had the hospitality and the warmth of spending an afternoon with Rakesh and his wonderful wife. And then, of course, I've had the good fortune of also rediscovering and reconnecting with him recently when I discovered that now he chairs the Axis Bank board, and I thought it would be an amazing opportunity for all the wonderful young people who are associated with soil and also some of the experienced leaders who come every Thursday to be part of our series to have these conversations. Rakesh, when the COVID crisis broke, I was asking myself the question, what can I do to serve well-being of all? And this was then revealed to me that if one could host meaningful digital conversations, which will enable people to really learn from the other people's experience and gain the positive energy in themselves so that they could overcome whatever anxiety they were feeling, the fear they were feeling, the ambiguity they were experiencing. Because, VUCA is something which we all were using it as a term. And we thought VUCA was the last financial crisis of 2008, or maybe it was 9/11 or something like that. But what has happened now, I don't think any one of us could imagine this. So, thank you very much for doing this for us. And so thank you, Rakesh, for coming here.
Thank you, Anil. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm glad that we reconnected after quite a few years. As you said, last we met was in China physically. And then, of course, our last few months, there are very few people you meet physically, but it's great to connect again on this platform.
Thanks a lot. Rakesh, I always begin with my favorite question, which is to ask the leaders on this platform who agree to be part of this conversation. And amongst all the wonderful things, Rakesh, you have done in many different contexts in your life, what are some of the memories that stand out for you? Because life, as we get older, when we look back, there are some moments that stand out for us when we were fully alive, when we were at our happiest best. So could you recount some of those moments and share when you were at your happiest best?
Well, Anil, I've been generally a happy person in terms of where I am and what I do. So, you introduced me in my three avatars. This is the fourth one, which is what I call the first phase of my career, which was as an engineer. I used to work for a Dutch engineering company called Kinetics Technology International. And I worked with them in Holland till 89. And all the three companies I worked with, KTI, Tata Honeywell / Honeywell, and SKF, frankly, I had no desire to leave any one of them. It's just that in 89, my wife said, I think we should go home. Our children need to grow up around their grandparents and be emotionally secure. So we came back. And then I joined Tata Honeywell, which is a huge, very exciting experience. It was a startup though at that time. It was just 1 year old. And you worried about whether you had enough money to pay salaries, whether you were worried about a lot of things that perhaps you don't worry about today. And then, of course, I came to SKF when Honeywell was in a bit of a turmoil with GE trying to acquire Honeywell, and that maybe I thought maybe it's time to sort of move on. So, I mean, in all these areas, and I was reflecting a bit on this question that you asked, I think the first one was when I came to SKF, I discovered a company that was a world leader. And as you know, SKF is a world leader in bearings. I think it had somewhere lost their way during the 90s when the economic liberalization took place and a lot more competition came in. And I came to SKF in 2002. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get this engine to move? I'd had some exposure to Six Sigma in Honeywell. And I thought maybe I should apply Six Sigma, not so much for the productivity end, but more in terms of getting the entire engine fired up in SKF. And I think what I discovered at that point of time, I discovered actually gold with the Six Sigma initiative. I didn't realize what I got. And you would know very well that, you know, when you go into an old established company, the leader, and you come from outside, the leaders you work with, somewhere there's a bit of a resistance to the changes you want to make. So when Six Sigma started, and I started personally picking up the key leaders for the black belts that I want to run, I think I picked the top 50 leaders and all 2-3 levels below the leadership team. And that was a true revelation for me, that what level of gold there was in the organization. And I think the people I discovered, they run the company today. They run the company in basically different parts of the SKF world. One is the managing director of SKF Sweden, an Indian running SKF Sweden. One is the managing director of SKF Indonesia. So it was, I think, one of the happiest moments I had. And even today, when I sort of think back, and I didn't plan it that way, to be honest. You know, some things you do, and you think it might work, and something it works beyond your expectations. So that was the first part, you know, of something that still makes me very happy when I see those 20, 30 guys doing so well around the world. Some in SKF, some outside SKF. And they all say that, you know, you picked us out. I said, I didn't do anything. I just basically sort of focused on who are the best people in the organization, and you proved yourself. The second question that you asked about, which is the second case, you know, I used to live in Mumbai, and the largest SKF factory was in Pune. And I had a habit that I would go to the factory at least once a week, if not more. And I'd leave Bombay at my home at about 6:50 in the morning. I'll be in the factory just as it was opening around 8:15. And I started, you know, and you see it everywhere. You just don't notice it. So many kids playing cricket on the road. So I asked our HR guy, I said, can't we have these guys come into our factory and play cricket? And he says, they can, but how will you do it? I said, okay. And we basically worked with, this is in Chinchwad, Pimpri Chinchwad. We figured out some 50 government schools. And we went and recruited, when I say recruited, I mean, we basically sort of picked out people who wanted to do this. 100 kids, 50 girls, 50 boys. And we said, we play cricket and we play hockey. That was what we started. This is in 2005. And I tell you, every time I go to the factory, the first thing I would do in the morning, I'd go and visit we had SK had a 100-acre plot there. And we converted the big field, which was a golf driving range, into a cricket and a football ground. So I'd go there, I'd see the kids practicing, and our buses would pick them up. They'd bring them to our factory, they would warm up, they'd play, they have a snack, and then they deliver them back to the schools again. And this is still running. I mean, this is like, I started this thing, and I say I along with my colleagues, in 2005. This is 2020, and now it's gone much, much beyond. We dropped cricket because we think cricket everyone wants to play. So now it's only football, because we wanted to popularize football. And the girls' football team and the boys' football team, they go to Sweden every year for what is called the Gothia Cup. and they actually gone for many years. They wouldn't go past the first round. Now they went to the quarterfinals. They're there in the semi-finals. So I think these two things, I've given a long answer to a short question. They still make me so happy that, you know, we started something which was like a seed, and it has become so overwhelming in terms of what is achieved.
You know, both these things that you talked about, the Six Sigma initiative, which I know because having been part of Six Sigma movements and having facilitated Six Sigma movements across large number of organizations, you know, it requires a certain culture. It requires a certain amount of trust. It also requires a learning mindset, which is different from a different mindset, you know. And similarly, the second aspect that you talked about of looking at people, looking at what gives them joy and creating a sense of community around people, around sport, and getting multiple stakeholders involved to encourage sports to express the best in themselves. So both of them have some similarities. Could you tell us as to where did this come from? And, you know, tell us more about both these things, especially the
Well, you
softer.
know,
Yeah.
I think everyone is looking to do something which, just like you asked me, what makes me happy? They're also looking to do things which make them happy. And the cultural element of the Six Sigma journey, I sort of used to tell my leadership team, I said, if we don't demonstrate it, it won't work. And we used to celebrate every success, big or small. We would celebrate the success. We would have these young guys stand up on tables and show us what they were done. And we spent an awesome amount of time in doing these things. And I think the organization was so fired up with what they saw happening. I think I should add that, you know, somewhere around 2007 or so, I started feeling that we were plateauing out on Six Sigma, because somewhere the innovation, the energy was getting dissipated. So that time I said, if we don't add TPM, the total productivity management, because we're excluding the workshop, the factory workers from our journey in Six Sigma, they come to a point and they can't go beyond that. So we have to add TPM so that they participate in this journey. So Six Sigma come TPM. And that, I think, again, revived, energized the entire organization. Is it still as energized? I think it is, but in a different way. It's much more cultural, embedded now. But it's, you know, small things, if they become big and they get embedded into the fabric of the organization, you think, okay, you've done some good in the world, you've done some good for yourself and for the organization.
How very nice. And one of making sport a way of unifying people. Tell us more about that initiative and what did you learn out of facilitating that part?
Well, you know, I was, this is way beyond CSR became a mandatory sort of thing. This is way back in 2005, 2004 actually. And I would always say that I don't want to donate money. It's not that I don't want to donate for the sake of not donating, but I want a commitment to what we want to do in the community, which means our own employees must be part of it. And if our own employees are not part of it, then I know that we're just writing a check, and that check is how it's spent, how well, fruitfully it sort of captures what we want to do is anyone's guess. So not that we didn't give money to the worthwhile and the merit-based NGOs, but I said, you know, 30, 40 of you need to get involved with me. I will basically be there as your sponsor, as your cheerleader, but you have to do the work. And these guys were there at, 8 o'clock in the morning, and they were hand-holding. They'd go to the children's houses because some of the children we started noticing one more thing, that the children started doing academically much better after they got involved in something like this. Because they were more focused. That the parents would tell us that we have never seen our child come so happy and so focused in what they're doing. So it tells you how much potential there is to do more. And you just have to sort of start somewhere.
Very good. Rakesh, let's move on to now your journey, because you are one of the few Indians who became an expat? I mean, earlier, the early part of your life, you were in Europe, then you went later on to China, then you went back to Europe. So talk to us, especially about China being a lot in the news. How was that experience of working from China in a global company? What did you learn, and how did you enable yourself and others to transcend their differences, which sometimes people feel of intercultural differences? So help us to learn from that experience.
I was very pleasantly surprised, Anil, that I found the aspirations of the Indian people that I knew so well and the Chinese so similar. They're all highly aspirational, all highly ambitious. Every 2 years, they want a new job. Every 2 years, they want to know, like, am I going to be a general manager? Am I going to be a vice president? And I found this very common between what I saw out here and what I saw in China. And frankly, I had a very, very pleasant experience working with my Chinese colleagues. We sort of understood what we were trying to do. And China was, at that point of time, maybe it's bigger now what it used to be, but at that point of time, all of Asia's revenues, 50% came from China. And we had put a plan in place that we were going to actually make our sales turnover in Asia about 2.5 times what the size when I went in 2010. But my experience in China was extremely positive. I worked a lot with the Chinese. I went to visit the factories. I went to see the owners of the different organizations that we worked with. I think one thing that actually I observed, the level of ambition amongst the entrepreneurs and the businessmen in China is much, much bigger than our businessmen. There was a guy who used to make these truck trailers. And he set up a factory about, I think, 6-7 years before I visited him. He invited me to his factory, and I went there, and I saw these 10 big, huge sheds out there, manufacturing sheds. So I went to the first one where it was full, second one was full. And he says, Mr. Makhija, the 8 are for our future growth. I said, each of this is about 800 meters long. He said, yeah, in the next 3-4 years, these will all be filled up. We are the world leaders in truck trailers. And I said, you put all this capital in anticipation of, he says, yeah, that's the way we do things here. And I found this actually quite common in China, that the entrepreneurs there, the businessmen, their ambition level, and the government supported them hugely. I think they had the full support of the government. In the sense, I used to say the government is the entrepreneur in China, and they support their businesses so hugely and so well. And I think we can do more here. And this is, I hope that will also happen some point of time, that the government needs to support our businesses much, much more. But overall, my experience in China was very, very good. I've always had this one criticism of being an expat. And this I've seen, like, I've been an expat for the last 6-7 years when I went to China, then I went to Sweden. So when we used to have expats in India, I'd say that, as quickly as possible, we should fill these positions up with local people. The first year, they're trying to figure out what to do. Second year, they figured out what to do. Third year, looking for a new job. And I said, that doesn't work. You need to have a 5-year time span before you can actually show that you did something, that the results are there for everyone to see. Did I achieve that? Partially. I mean, I also was a true expat sort of thing, but that was my criticism of the expat structure. And I always used to say that select your people and localize them as quickly as possible, unless it's almost impossible, which is not, of course, true.
Now tell me, being an Indian, of course, highly qualified Indian, and you had these wonderful experiences, you went on to head organizations, and now you chair one of India's most respected banks. What do you attribute the realization of your own potential to? I mean, who are the people you feel have contributed to shaping you? What did you learn from them? And how has that enabled you in your own leadership journey?
I've been fortunate, and I guess that's a standard response that we all have. That we've all had good leaders to work with. I think there's one that stands out in my mind, and I call that person the only mentor I had in my life. And he was my chairman in Tata Honeywell, a gentleman called Jim Setna. He was the director in Tata Sons.
Yes, I know him.
And before that, he was the chairman. He was the chairman of Ingersoll Rand.
Yes.
And he was my chairman, and I'm sure many of you can relate to what I'm saying now, that when I became the CEO of Tata Honeywell, you obviously come with a lot of things you want to do, but you're also a bit worried if you're doing the right thing. So I would call him periodically as my chairman to say that, and to his credit, if he was not available, he'd call me at 9 o'clock at night and talk to me for 1 hour, 1.5 hours about various things. And one day he said something to me, which I've repeated that to many people who worked with me. He said, Rakesh, I want you to know one thing, that you are the executive CEO of the company. I'm the non-executive chairman of Tata Honeywell. Whatever you ask me, you're welcome to come and ask me, and I will tell you everything I know. The decision you make is your decision. It is not my decision. I am just giving you an advice. I will never check with you if you took my decision or not, because if you do it right, the credit goes to you. And if it doesn't go right, it's for you to manage that. And I thought, and it actually, I think, emboldened me so much in terms of what I want to do. I would pick his brains, and he would tell me what he wanted me to, what his wisdom was. And I think he was one of the wisest people that I ever met. And even after I left Tata Honeywell, I think I used him as a sounding board so often. I'd call him from China sometimes, chat with him, and he would spend as much time as I needed. So to your question, I think I was lucky to have this mentor, and he died last year at the ripe age of 90. Until that time, I think he always had time for me. I always had the highest respect for his wisdom. And I think all these things, I've been fortunate to work with very, very good people. I think my first, in Tata Honeywell, our boss at that time, the first MD, Madhu Bhagwat, he, I think, set up such a great leadership pipeline. He retired, I took his position, I retired, I stepped out, not retired. So there's a whole pipeline of people from within the company that kept on becoming managing directors. And today, some of them occupy positions in Honeywell globally, in very, very high positions. So I think we just had so much fun together. We worked together, we challenged each other. And maybe I was fortunate that we were able to build that sort of trust and honesty and transparency with each other. We never doubted each other. We never had any political sort of things. When I told Vinayak Deshpande that I was moving on, he said, I don't want this job. He says, I want to work with you, but I don't want to do this job on my own. So I think I've just been very, very fortunate that I had very, very good people all through my life working with me, around me. And if I give myself a credit, I think I created maybe an environment that they trusted me also. And we could actually, without any inhibitions, challenge each other. The most important thing for a leader is to get challenged. You have to get worried when you don't get challenged. When people nod their head with what you say, you know there's something wrong. And when they say that, I think you're talking nonsense, you know you're on the right track with the people you hired. Because they're going to tell you if you are going the wrong direction or you need to change. So I was very, very fortunate that a lot of people within SKF, within Tata Honeywell, within my first company in KTI, we had this great sort of relationships around.
You're very fortunate. because if you only have people, if you surround yourself with people who only agree with you, I think you do disservice to yourself and to them. So, thank you for bringing that out. Rakesh, there's another interesting question I want to ask you. Although your current role in Axis Bank is non-executive chairman, but in the eyes of the regulator, the RBI, you play a very crucial role. And India's banking sector is undergoing, to say that it is going through challenging times is probably the understatement of the year. It's like saying COVID is just another flu. So looking at the distress in the banking sector in the country, help us to understand what are the root causes of this huge problem? Because we, on one hand, we have all these public sector banks having all these non-performing assets, and people talk about the ethics of the Indian promoters and how these loans were indiscriminately sanctioned to them. On the other hand, we have even some of our best private sector banks, leadership teams in the past have been questioned for their governance and ethics. So in this environment, what do you think is the root cause of the problem in our banking sector, and what are some of the solutions that are coming to you as the chair of the wonderful bank that can set these things right? So what are your insights about it?
Let me try and sort of answer this question 2-3 different ways, and I hope that it will sort of come together. I think in the early part of this decade, there was a big focus on infrastructure, which was on areas of power, steel, roads, airports, and various other projects. And a number of lending institutions started basically working with some of these promoters who were running these steel companies, these power companies, and highway companies, and so on and so forth. For various reasons, a lot of these projects went bankrupt, went bad. And they went bad not necessarily because of the promoter's problem, but various policies were not clear. And maybe there was a bit of, you mentioned the word, like a bit of some ambiguity in terms of how these loans were handled. So the stress built up somewhere around the 2014-15 timeframe, where Raghuram Rajan, to his credit, started the process of cleaning up, and he started asking banks to actually look at, in an accelerated manner, how do you take care of the stress that you have on your balance sheet. So that process was en route. That's still happening. And we basically, and I'm talking specifically about our bank now, think that we more or less have basically cleaned out all the stress we had over the, and about at this precise point of time, of a few quarters back. To your point about public sector banks and private sector banks, I think fortunately most of our private sector banks are well capitalized, and they've made a lot of effort to make sure they are well capitalized. Whether it's the top 3-4 private sector banks, the public sector banks have been helped for capitalization by the government, but I think they still will need a lot more support. So now COVID happens. And obviously, as COVID happened, it was going to only accelerate the process of stress around, because if you look at this, take airports, take hotels, take the travel industry, and these are just few examples here. They went fully belly up because there's no one traveling, there's no one staying in hotels. So, and these are only 3-4 representative examples. There are many, many more. So to counter against the possible stress that can happen, and of course, as you know, the Reserve Bank also declared that that we will give a moratorium for people who cannot pay during this crisis, COVID crisis. So there's a moratorium 1, moratorium 2. So this has been provided, and that is over now. I think it remains to be seen we think there will be a fair amount of stress that will come out of people not being able to repay the loan, whether it's home loans or it's credit card bills, or it's in the corporate sector, in some of the sectors that I mentioned. The positive side is that, and I think we're all learning as we go along, that we've learned what COVID is. We've also seen some upside, even if we see like you saw that 25% drop in the economy in the first quarter. But we're seeing some of the bounce back. And we think that the sector will come back, if not so fast, but at least it will come back. So to your question, I think it's been a very, very rough journey for a lot of banks. There's some who withstood very well, but the most important thing has been for us, as we've sort of discussed within our bank, is to make sure that we are well capitalized to handle whatever contingencies happen now and over the next few quarters. And I think most of us are doing that.
Thank you, Rakesh. I want to ask you one last question before I open it up for question answers from the audience. And I would request the audience to please start asking questions in the Q&A box that is given there. And also you may please give your comments in the chat box. My question to you, Rakesh, is that, amongst all the things that have happened, this is a different question from the question I started with. What moment would you describe as which was a particularly difficult or a trying moment? Something which felt like you felt anxious, you felt fearful, you felt what you would call the biggest challenge you faced or the biggest failure you experienced, anything in that kind? And how did you deal with that adversity, that low point, that difficulty in your life, if you could share with us?
I think we all encounter fear. And basically, it's the fear of failure that really sort of hits us the most. That if you've been mandated to do something and you think that it's not going the way it should, I'm trying to sort of think through which are the most difficult moments for me. I think most of them, I've been fortunate that I haven't encountered anything which has led to any loss of reputation, a failure on account of some lapses that we did. Most of them have been areas where I felt that I was not able to accomplish things because psychological, otherwise there were some blockades that I could not overcome. And this comes in many forms, like when you want to move very fast, and some people say that you can't do this for various reasons. And in a large organization, you can get completely, scumped by the negative elements of you can't do this, you can't do that. So I think one of the decisions I took, and this is way back again in 2004, 2005, I'd set up a strategic plan for the company. And I said that we will triple our turnover in 3 years. So we were, and many of the audience here will think these are small numbers, but those days they were not that small. We were a 500 crore company in 2004. And I said we will be a 15 crore company in 2007. And most of my colleagues said that it's impossible. And I said, okay, it's impossible, but I'm with you. I'll get the thing on my chest if we fail. You still have your job. But let's try this together. Let's try and do this together. And one of our most important businesses, which was a distribution business, we had our largest distributor who was, in my mind, becoming more of a bottleneck than a path for success for us. So one day I told our business head, I said, let's fire him. He said, no, we can't fire him. He brings half the sales that we have. I said, fire him. I got a lot of flack for that decision initially, that I fired our biggest distributor. I sent our CFO to Calcutta, that's where he was based. I said, sit in his office and I will call and say that you're fired. And you make sure you control everything from there. I think I sort of look back And as I said, I got a lot of flack for that initially. But our sales just took off from there. We found at least 7 to 10 more distributors coming up and telling me that, we couldn't work because he used to underprice, undercut us, do everything to spoil our reputation. Now we'll show you what we can do. So I think it's just one example that sometimes you have to take the most difficult decisions where everyone's telling you it's not a smart thing to do. And you say that, let's do it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rakesh, for bringing that up. Now, Ravi Medikesi is asking a question. He's saying, why is RBI not able to figure out a major crisis like Yes Bank proactively? And why can't the regulator address these issues ahead of the curve instead of reacting when there is a crisis later?
That's a tough question to answer, but I'll try and answer it. I think the RBI is getting much, much more proactive now. And I've been in the banking business for the last 5 years. I joined the board in 2015. So I have seen the huge improvements that the RBI has made in their processes. I have a lot of respect for all the different governors who have come in after that, after Raghuram Rajan and so on. And to your question, why didn't we anticipate what was going to happen to Yes Bank? All of us had an inkling about what would happen to Yes Bank. And to RBI's credit, they did act as they did before it went belly up. They have tried to save it. I think they've brought an SBI, State Bank of India, to try and help save it, which I think you have to give the RBI credit for. And to the next question, that why can't they think ahead of the curve? I think it's always learning. You can say, why couldn't we see this earlier? Why could we see COVID coming? We didn't see it. But COVID is here. I think you're discovering new business models. We're discovering new ways of doing business. We're discovering that what we do, there are many different ways of doing the same thing and much more productively and much more beneficially. So it's a learning curve.
Rami Mukhija, our common friend who used to be a board member of Larsen and Toubro, he has fond memories of having worked with you both at Honeywell and SKF, and he's saying that you are perhaps being modest when you say fortunate to have worked with great people. I think he says that it is because of your own talent, your own passion, your own perseverance this has happened. So would you, for the sake of the young leaders on this program, tell them, what do you attribute? What are the couple of aspects that are present in you that have helped you to make an impact? What are those things, what are those virtues that our students especially should develop if they want to make a mark in life?
One of the things that I've always held against a lot of people when they tell me that I will play the devil's advocate, I tell them I don't want a devil's advocate. It's not that I have anything fundamentally against people who find flaws, but I am an eternal optimist. And I always see the opportunity in whatever we are doing or what we want to do. And there'll be 10 different guys telling me that, this can go wrong and this can go wrong and this can go wrong. And I said, yes, if it goes wrong, we'll fix it. We'll go along. And I'm not for a moment saying that you should not review everything that's to be done. But the first and foremost thing, I think, since you asked the question, is I am an eternal optimist. I like to see things that what you think is not possible. I'd say that let's try and make it work. And let's work together. I think teamwork is an extremely important part. Working together as teams. There's no one individual who can accomplish anything worthwhile. 5 of you sit together around a room, and you can accomplish so much as long as you focus energy on the right things. You focus energy on, I will be a devil's advocate, you will come out 5 hours later and have nothing there. But if you say, okay, there are few things we should be careful about, but at the same time, teamwork plays fantastically well for anyone wanting to do anything in this world. And this third is always listen to people down the line, not necessarily people who work with you directly, 2 levels below. Walk around the shop floor, walk around the cafeteria, sit with these guys in the cafeteria, have lunch with them. You will get so many ideas, so many things that people will not know about. And just because you sit with them and have lunch together, they'll tell you that, why don't we look at it this way? I look at it and I said, wow, no one ever told me this. So these small nuggets of information, you walk around the people you work with, make yourself visible, and not just for the sake of being visible, because you're going to get so many ideas about what to do. And if you pick out 2 or 10, I think you've got a winner.
Wonderful. Vishal Singh is asking a question. He says, risk of not doing anything in a big company is also a big value destroyer. How is the bank today creating a culture of intelligent risk taking so that there are people who experiment, become more innovative, and get rewarded for it?
Well, I can tell you that with first-hand experience in the bank that I'm proud to be the chairman of. I think we have so many good things happening there right now. We've learned the hard way of some of the decisions we took a few years ago, and that went bad for us in terms of non-performing assets. We've also learned that we cannot stay in this risk-averse mode, and you have to create the environment where failures are okay. It's not necessarily the best thing that happens, but if failures don't happen, that means you're making no progress. So Amitabh Chaudhary, who's our CEO in Axis Bank, I think it was going on earlier, but when the COVID crisis came, so we asked as a board that let's look at the top 10 things that we should be doing at this point of time. And the things that we should be doing relate to employees, number one. How do we keep them safe? How do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them productive? Secondly, how do we reach out to our customers and actually use this opportunity? And this is not to be used in a wrong sense, but they are insecure. What's going to happen to their jobs? They're insecure. How will they pay their home loans? Let's reach out to them. And Amitabh used to call 15, 20 customers, top customers every day. And so his entire leadership team and some of us also. So I think within this environment, we've created a number of projects that have worked really well for us, which are, and some of those are obvious, like, digitalization is much, much bigger than it was. It was always going to be, but it's been accelerated. Looking at the risk element, we can't avoid risk. At the same time, we are saying that we must have a strong process to make sure that we don't go beyond the certain guardrails that we put in place. We can't go beyond the agreed process. If you want to go beyond that, come to the board. Let's talk about it, and we'll provide the sort of flexibility. But let's go with the process in place. And that's what is happening right now. I think we're making a lot of progress. Are we making mistakes? I'm sure we are. But within the board and the management, I think we are talking much, much more often. We are meeting almost like once a month, officially or unofficially, to make sure that we all understand where we are and what the challenges are.
Very nice. Sneha Yadav, one of our very talented young students, she's asking a question. What is the number one aspect that you look for as a trait in your new hires when you are inducting new people into the bank, for example? And you can also refer to in the past, in your earlier organizations, what is common about what you look for in young talent whom you bring into the organization?
I have this one bad habit. I never hire anyone with one interview. Sometimes it used to become a joke that, I would get sent a candidate saying that as a formality, let him meet Rakesh. And I would get the candidate to meet me. And if I didn't like the candidate, it was different. But if I liked the candidate, I would never say that, okay, I think we're okay. I would go back and say that I want to meet another time. And what I was looking for that time is, I was trying to assess in different situations how this person would react. And somewhere, and we all know that, passion is an extremely important part of passion if it's directed in the right way. You can have passion, which is, it can make you distracted also. But if it's in the right way, passion plays a huge role in terms of what a person can accomplish. So I try to do that in many forms. I would sort of, meet someone and say, okay, let's go around for lunch. Let's have lunch together. And a informal conversation tells you much more about that person and who he or she could be than just a meeting in your office. And I think that helped me identify what I wanted. And I said passion is an important part of what I was looking for, hunger to do a good job. So that was some of the things. I think there's no sort of absolute formula in this thing. It's just that you see someone, you see the openness, you see the curiosity, you see the desire to make a difference, and you say, well, this could work. Have I been wrong in some of the people I hired? Yes, I've been wrong also.
Sure.
But if your track record is you got 6 out of 10 right, I think you did a good job.
Wonderful. Deen Dayalan, who works with the grassroots level people, he runs a consulting and training firm with about 100 trainers and consultants who work on the shop floor with the blue collar. So Deen Dayalan is asking a question. He said, in this rough weather, how can banks like yours contribute to the network economy in rural areas and promote self-sustainable micro-enterprise, especially around women?
Anil, we already do that. As it is today sitting under, we have microfinance as one business that we run. But along with that, we're running as part of our CSR initiative, working with in the rural areas with a lot of women who want to be entrepreneurs, and we basically we are lenders to them. At the same time, we are training them and teaching them what are the things that they should be aware of as they start their businesses, as they start their work. So that's an ongoing exercise that we're doing already.
Wonderful. Dr. Anil Khandelwal, who himself has been a respected banker, former chairman of Bank of Baroda, former Soil board member and a dear friend, he says, Rakesh, you come from a manufacturing background and then you came to banking. What differences in culture are palpable in terms of leadership, competency, culture, hierarchies, risk-taking, employee relations? Can you elaborate the differences?
I think my impression has changed dramatically from the outside. When I came into the world of banking, I felt it was very different in what I saw in the manufacturing world versus what I perceived to be in the banking world. But ultimately, I think people are always the same. They have the same aspirations. They want growth. They want development. They want to learn. And you provide all these things. I think they're all the same attributes that you find anywhere else. I think the canvas is very different in terms of the different backgrounds that they come from. But in terms of the cultural element, it very much depends upon the top leadership to create the culture, which is a culture of customer centricity, of looking after your employees, looking after the institution, looking after the CSR element of your bank, the ability to give, provide support. So I think it's the same. It's a similar answer that I gave you when you asked me about India and China. That when I went to China, I found people in Sweden, in India, in China, all basically wanting the same thing. They want to perform, they want to grow, they want to learn, and you provide all these levers, and you got them as a fully motivated member of your team.
It reminds me when I was heading Aisha Consultancy, one day I brought a team of all our consultants together. These people were working on Lean and Six Sigma and all that into large number of manufacturing plants, right? And I said to them, I see the bank has a factory inside, and we can introduce Six Sigma and Lean concepts in banks. They thought I'm out of my mind. I just had this feeling that actually the processes of a bank and are very much amenable to this. So, you
are 100% right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is one of the first observations that I made after I entered the bank, when I saw the different processes that we have to work with and how many times we get it right and how many times we don't get it right, my first thought was, why can't Six Sigma work here? And I think this is exactly what we're doing in the bank now.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that Axis Bank is now doing it, because when I was heading ECS, ICICI Bank was one of the first ones they chose us as consultants, and we did a lot of work there. And then in Aisha Consulting, it became our biggest practice, our financial services practice of applying Lean and Six Sigma. It became our biggest. We worked with then most of the financial institutions in the country. So, of course, not for Axis Bank, because it was a new bank, and very interesting that that is happening. Now, Rakesh Shanmugam is asking a question that your experiences are very diverse and encouraging. What is the one advice you would like to provide for the new generation who are starting their careers?
Okay, let me try and answer that as faithfully as I can. I think one, don't get worried by what you see happening right now. When I say happening right now, I'm talking about COVID. Disruption is not necessarily bad for industry. Disruption is good. It brings about a lot of new processes. It brings about a lot of thinking, innovation. And I think a lot of people, and there's different boards that I sit on, I see that after the initial anxiety, a lot of the companies are actually redeveloping their strategy footprint, the blueprint, in terms of how they will still run the business, how they will remain relevant to their customers, how they will actually be profitable, maybe more so in the future. So my first and foremost advice is that treat this as something that is going to add something to you rather than take something away. Productivity is good. I think that the digital element is going to be great. It was always happening. It's just got accelerated. And keep this element of adventure and open-mindedness. That as you enter the world, the real world, what they call when you're going to work, you will have different demands from perhaps what you learned in your institution and colleges, but you will learn. And we're all learning as we go along. So it's not like anyone's going to be right or wrong. We're all going to learn together, but this will come out to be a very, very beneficial exercise. It happens every 20, 30, 40 years that some disruption takes place. We all get worried. What's going to happen? There are going to be job losses. And always there have been job addition rather than losses, maybe in different areas. Wonderful. So my advice to you is keep a very open, adventurous mind. Treat this as something that you can learn from. Read everything. Talk to a lot of leaders like Anil, who will tell you what he's seeing in different companies. Talk to a lot of other leaders who are seeing reorienting their blueprint, strategic blueprint, and you'll know that they're all trying to position their companies for the better to make sure they're sustainable, profitable, and relevant to their customers.
Wonderful. Our common friend and your colleague from Axis Bank, Rajesh Dhaya, is here. So he's asking a question. What's your one advice to the younger set of business leaders, even startups?
My advice to them is basically use this period to actually build something that the market requires. Use this period to understand what's happening around us so that you can actually, there are huge amount of opportunities that are emerging right now. While we worry about some of the old business models getting obsolete, there are lots of new business models that are emerging. So to the new entrepreneur, I'd say that look at this with fresh set of eyes, and you will see in the service space, in the manufacturing space, lots of new things that are possible today. So to my friend, I'd say that he could have asked this question offline, but the answer is, I think the entrepreneurs have a huge opportunity right now to do something really worthwhile and good in these times.
Wonderful. Mayur, who's a young leader, is asking this question. Should a young engineer be happy with a crappy job role because of opportunities to be employed and money, or be happy to wait for an opportunity which enhances his competence and job role and even though the person has to go through some difficulty in the recession time? What would be your advice?
So if I understand correctly, the question is, should you take up a job if it's offered to you, or should you do something else? Which means either go for another or higher level education or work for yourself. I presume
Another
that.
question, that should he accept a job because the need is high right now, or should he wait for the right opportunity where he can grow in terms of his own learning much more?
It's hard for me to be prescriptive there. I think
Correct.
if the situation is such that you need a job to make sure your family is safe and provided for, even if it's temporary, I think you should take the job. And this does not mean that the world closes around you once you have one job, but it's also up to you to, when you say a crappy job, you can make that job extremely worthwhile also if you put your heart and mind into it. If you do a great job, and most people love someone who can do a great job, and you get rewarded for that. So don't use the word crappy job, because that sets a negative tone. I'd say that, okay, I don't necessarily think I want to do this, but if family circumstances such that you think you should do it, I think you should.
Okay. So Amit is asking a question, Amit Nema, that in a situation where everyone in a team is loaded with a lot of work and responsibility, how can I motivate them to engage in teamwork? Because teamwork requires everyone to take on a little bit more work to stretch their hand to support each other. But everybody is so stressed by their own individual goals that sometimes they don't have time to be supporting one another. How would you tackle that?
I think this is where leadership comes in. I think, for want of a better word, I'd say I use a term called a group leader or your manager. The manager has a huge responsibility to make sure that all of the team members are fully motivated, that if they have any personal issues, and some people have had a number of personal issues working from home, sometimes we forget that people are working in relatively cramped apartments where they have parents, where they have children, and they're working, and it's like a non-stop office from 8 a.m. to maybe 10 p.m. or even later. So it's bound to lead to a fair amount of stress for them. And where I think the top leadership and the immediate manager has a role to play is to make sure that these meetings become much more frequent in terms of pick up the phone. You don't have to talk about business all the time. Say that, what can I help you with? Is there something that maybe I can give you, for want of a better thing, a dongle so that you have a secure internet connection? I can give you something that will help you do this better. Do you need headphones? Do you need this? So I think the element of caring is very important at this time. And if caring is there, most employees reciprocate in a very, very good way, that he cares, she cares.
Good. One last question from Dr. Ajay Agarwal. What can we do to increase spending dramatically so that the economy is, sort of put into a stimulus?
For you to increase spending dramatically means people need to have money in their hands. So there's been a lot of discussion about government stimulus. There's been a lot of discussion that if people are given more money, they will spend more money. And I think that's fundamentally correct, because you cannot spend money if you don't have money. So we've been fortunate this time that the monsoon has been good. The harvest has been good. So there was money in the hands of the farmers, which you see getting utilized in terms of number of tractors getting sold. You see utilized in terms of the investment they made into their the harvest that they're planting, or in different areas. Should there be more of a stimulus? I'd say the answer should be yes. We need to revive the economy, and we need to get the confidence back to the people that they are going to survive and they're going to do well. So I think the government, and I shouldn't take only the government, so I think we all have a role to play there, to try and get more money into the hands of the employees. And for that reason, we talk about this very often in some of the boards when there talks about job losses. And my viewpoint has always been that should be the last thing that we do. We have to make sure that our employees are safe. And I don't mind if we say that we're going to pay you 80% of salary, 70% of salary. But to say that you stay at home, knowing that that individual may not get a job for the next 12 months. And we don't have social security in this country as much as other countries have. So that should be the very, very last option. If it's about preventing a survival, you do that, otherwise you don't.
Thank you. Rakesh, what a delight to have you this evening with us. Here are some of the things I learned from you and with you today, Rakesh. I think there has been a strong theme of the sense of community, teamwork, and getting people to come together to achieve higher standards and to make a difference. You pointed out this in the Six Sigma work you did, which was happy. You pointed this out in the sports becoming as a way for serving society. You talked about the importance of teamwork even when you gave answers. So this is very clear in your mind that nobody achieves anything by herself or himself, that it requires everybody to convene together, come together. And the more we learn to collaborate, the more we will get things done, the more we will find it easy to take over problems and challenges and overcome the crisis. So in COVID, extreme collaboration. So C of COVID requires a response of collaboration. So wonderful. The second, you attributed your success to so many people, but I was very touched when you talked about your mentor, the chairman in Tata Honeywell, Setna. And you said that he listened to you and he encouraged you. But he asked you to discover the answers yourself. He was not telling you this is what you ought to do. What a wonderful gift that if you can listen with attention, if you can show caring, I am with you, and yet encourage you to find the answers that work best for you so that you develop in the process, I think you have discovered the way of growing people. The third aspect you talked about, with all this frenzy about China bashing going on in this country, you were objective enough to say, when I was in China, I found this hunger. I found this entrepreneurs willing to think big, entrepreneurs who were willing to work very hard, very passionate, and who had big dreams of entering the world stage. They were not miserly in their thinking. Of course, the government was an entrepreneur and helping them. But a lot of us entrepreneurs and a lot of us leaders, even in workplaces, become miserly even in the way we dream. We don't care enough. We are not passionate enough. And you recognize the great quality that is something we can learn from China in spite of all this bad that we are creating here right now. You also said that just because tennis was won by, John Borg won the Wimbledon 5 times doesn't mean that it becomes a Swedish game. I mean, you said it that whether you are in Sweden or you are in China or you are in India, good leadership and good management is people want to learn, they want to develop, they love a challenge, they need respect and fair treatment. And if you provide all that, people will achieve a lot. So that's what we need to understand rather than worry about the context of our industry. Sometimes we put too much emphasis on the technical and functional skills and do not understand that after all, it's all about the people who do well. So thanks a lot, Rakesh. I think you are, I always have found you to be a very balanced leader, a very mature leader. And thank you for who you are. Thank you for all the wonderful things that you have done. And I hope one day when the COVID goes away, we will have you a physical presence in our campuses in this part of the world, and look forward to that.
Thank you, Anil. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I hope that I added to the wonderful platform that you created here. And good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rakesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.